Hello and welcome back to another episode of You Want to Do What. Today we've got Stephen Darrah on, who is the CEO and founder of Fueled. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks so much for having me on.
Our pleasure. How are we today?
Really good. Yeah, I mean, I'm super disappointed by the news about Sean Locke because he was one of my favorite comedians ever. But other than that, I mean, life is good. So yeah,
I used to watch 8 out of 10 Cats do Countdown all the time, and he was brilliant on there.
just a wonderful mind and a sad loss. But
Definitely
yeah,
a sad loss. Stephen, should we jump straight in then? Do you want to tell everyone a bit about what you do?
sure. So I'm the founder of Fueled. We're sort of a hybrid cross-class of an insurance broker and an insurance technology company. We're FCA regulated. We've hired our 12th member of staff today, going all guns blazing, trying to forge this new way of selling business insurance to really exciting companies. Been trading for about 3 years, and yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Amazing. So this is the Insuratech world, and for those that sort of aren't familiar with it, banking had its evolution with the fintech kind of world, and that's grown and grown. And Insuratech insurance is now starting to go through it with the likes of Stephen's companies. So, what is Insuratech, and how is it changing the insurance industry?
Sure. So, insurance technology is I guess, in the most basic form, is technology for the insurance world. Because of the different facets of what insurance looks like. You've got the insurers that underwrite the business themselves. You've then got brokers that sell and transact. And I suppose more recently with the likes of Direct Line and Simply Business, for example, you've got a lot of online providers that have this transactional way of quote and buy via the internet. And I suppose that's how Insuratech started as the quote and buy elements. But you've also got things like back office administration systems. You've got data management, analytics systems, and I suppose more recently, like ourselves, you've got the policy management side of things as well as the quote and buy. So these nice sort of cross classes of insurance married with technology, which is super cool.
I'm sure I've bored our listeners enough with some stories from my days in insurance, but as I've said a few times, it is absolutely ripe for innovation. It is still too old-fashioned, too slow to move with the times, and I think the business that you're doing, and you're focusing on startups and sort of businesses in new areas and new industries. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose our proving point was really trying to focus on the businesses that the current insurance model neglected. We looked at startups and high growth companies, and we often found that they'd buy an insurance policy in January and it was completely irrelevant by February. If, like I mentioned in a couple of other things I've done, you look at the likes of Airbnb and Uber. They're growing significantly. They're adding offices and subsidiaries and employees all over the shop, and it's so difficult to keep on top of your business insurance when you're ever changing. And the current sort of archaic insurance model means that it's entirely reliant on the business owner to update the insurance providers about their changes. Whereas what we're doing with our technology is we're keeping track of our clients throughout the year using data sources that we have access to make sure that their insurance is always right. Huge admin saving, of course, but I think in the startup scene, about 90 to 95% of all startups are underinsured in some form or another. So it's addressing a massive problem in that space as well.
I can certainly relate to that. Doing a bit of consulting with sort of young companies and SMEs, the first thing I tend to look at is their insurance policies. And, 90% of the time they're massively underinsured or they've got the wrong policies in place. So having something where, the company doesn't really need to think about it. You just pull it from their data and advise based on that data is a massive leap forward for the industry, I think.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's certainly proven really successful, and we're at quite a nice turning point now where we've definitely proven the market. We've proven that the model's really strong, and it's just about getting our name out there now.
Amazing. So do you want to talk a bit about your personal journey as well? So, how did you get into this whole world and how did it begin for you?
Yeah, sure. So I think you'll speak to most insurance professionals and they'll openly admit that insurance wasn't the career that they had in mind when they left school. So from my point of view, I went to Hartbury College. I got a national diploma in sports science. And it was just, for me, going down that route was just a way of getting further education in something that I was passionate about in sport. But you quickly realize when you get to the end of your education, most people do, I think, with university as well, that what they've been studying for the last 2, 3, 4 years isn't really something that they want to do for the rest of their lives. I've always felt that the education sector is somewhat broken in that respect, because it seems like an incredible waste of money, albeit people do leave with an education, I suppose. So after the Hartbury College sort of rigmarole, I went to the States traveling. I spent a year in America. I did some weird and wacky things, predominantly working in the Camp America setups. And when I got back, I landed in London, found a flat with a friend that I went traveling with, and the first job I landed was in insurance. And that was just a way of paying the bills, really. It was quite a mediocre role, selling very low level insurance policies to caravan owners, really. And I've always had a natural passion for sales. I think sales is something I've always thought I was good at, and I used it as sort of a starting point to get into an industry where I could start selling and broaden my skills from a sales perspective. And from then, and through successive sales, really, it was just promotion after promotion. Moved a few companies to explore different roles, yeah, I mean, insurance is just one of those things that unfortunately you kind of get stuck in. It's an industry that has a great education. I think that's one thing that the insurance industry is really good for, is these apprenticeship and education programs, where if you end up at the right broker or the right insurer, they'll help you through the qualifications and really help you sort of earn your mark, or make your mark, as it were, in the industry. So I utilized that to some extent, but it got to a point where I was just way too focused on sales and trying to pick up new business and new clients, that education kind of went by the wayside. So I think if you looked at me from an insurance education standpoint, I've got a couple of exams under my belt, but I'm certainly probably on paper, probably one of the lesser qualified founders in the UK from an insurance standpoint. But I felt like I've learned a hell of a lot more in the role and working alongside some amazing companies during that process. I'm talking a bit here, but
no, it's okay. I have to say I agree with you about the qualifications in insurance. Myself personally, well, I was a broker in Lloyd's. I never particularly did well in exams at school, and I never felt that having to do further education within insurance actually benefited me, particularly just personally. I think it's great that industry does it, but it's not something that you necessarily need to do insurance.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think it becomes very apparent early on in insurance whether A, you like it, and B, you're good at it. I can't admit to actually liking insurance ever, if I'm completely honest. I know that's a terrible thing to say, considering I own an insurance business now. But I think that when you, and I think a lot of younger listeners will probably feel that this as well, but they look at insurance as something that isn't really exciting. It sounds pretty boring on the face of it. You see the traditional suits and ties and the blue suits of Lloyd's, and you kind of think it's not really all that glamorous either. So I think on the face of it, you look at insurance as a career that nobody really particularly wants, which I think is why quite a lot of people just fall into the industry as an available role at the right time. But really, there's some fascinating things going on within the industry. I mean, Insuratech is one of them, and I think that to address one of your comments earlier, I really feel like there's a generational shift at the minute. It feels like a lot of the old sort of pen and paper style of doing business is starting to move away from the industry or retiring, and we're finding that a lot of young, hungry, entrepreneurial people are starting to come into it. Insuratech over the last 5 years has just had a phenomenal boom. I mean, we've got some great unicorns in the UK, like Zigo, and bought by many now as well, and they're really shining a light on just how good insurance can be. And again, just to address what you said earlier, it is something that's so ripe for innovation. I think that insurers still aren't really helping themselves on that. I think that they all claim to want to innovate, but none of them really have teams that are set up to facilitate innovation. And we certainly find that the bigger brokers are innovating a lot more because of significant pulling power, I suppose, that they've got at a higher level at the top table, as it were. Whereas brokers that are just starting out trying to create a new innovation, they don't have the power of book, as it were, to help them really build out from there. So it is good, but it still has its issues, I think.
It's certainly an interesting industry, because if you look at any other industry, and certainly if you take the tech industry, for example, the big guys never seem to be able to innovate as quickly. But it doesn't really work that way in insurance, just because, like you say, they have these huge books of millions, sometimes billions of dollars of business that can force change in the industry. If they decide they need to do business a certain way, they can do it. They are still behemoths, and getting change through any size company is a difficult task, isn't it?
Very much so. And yeah, no, I think you're spot on. I think that if we started out and already had the millions of business under our belts, and we could take that book and turn it into this sort of super powered tech play, it would have been a lot easier to get insurers' attention. Whereas we've kind of had to reverse engineer that slightly, in that we had to sell policies that fit our future model and then try and get insurers to help us along that journey. So I think the build process for us has been an awful lot longer. But I also think that that's instilled some really good qualities in the way we act and behave as a business as well. We're not flippant with cash. We hire the right people at the right time, and just make sure that no penny is wasted, which I think is super important for startups as a rule of thumb as well.
So can you tell us a little bit about the process from, did you have this eureka moment where you were like, right, this is the way insurance needs to be? How did you actually come to say, right, I need to do this, I'm going to set this business up? What was that kind of journey like?
Yeah, so I think my career really changed in 2013, when I landed a fairly decent role at an independent insurance broker in Worcester. And at that time, I just had my first child. It was sort of a massive turning point in my life personally, and I felt this sort of like need and responsibility to just do better. And I started that role with a different fire in my belly than I think I'd started any other. And I really forged a path for myself just as a commercial insurance executive at the time, where I was looking for really exciting businesses to do business with. And I spent the majority of my working days speaking to these really cool companies that are doing really cool things, founders that would you just have different conversations with entrepreneurs than you do with, I suppose, just general staff. And I think during that process, your mind starts to wander on what innovations could be made within insurance. And after that, it just became more of a frustration thing for me, in that, as a broker, I was dealing with very high volumes of stuff. I had quite a large book of business, and a lot of my time was spent doing admin just on changes that were needed to be made by these companies. And it got to a stage where all these startups and high growth companies were doing amazing things. They were having to change their insurance all the time. It just made complete sense to try and automate that process. And quite frankly, the broker I was with at the time, albeit a great company, that just innovation was incredibly lacking. And by that point, I'd already made a name for myself. Insurance work was going well. I had a core book of clients, and I just thought, well, if I've done this for someone else, then there's no way, there's a good chance I'll be able to do it for myself. And I think that for me personally, as soon as I had the support of my wife, that was pretty much it. I never tell her that too often. But from my point of view, I think it's super important that you've got the backing of someone that has trust in you to deliver. Because as being quite entrepreneurial spirited anyway, I'd had a lot of ideas that quite frankly weren't really going to cut the mustard, I think, but something that I knew I could change and knew I could do a good job at. It just made complete sense. So I was on a fairly decent salary, which is I wouldn't say it's difficult to do in the insurance industry, but certainly the role that I had at the time was a good one. So I started putting money aside and slowly started building this thing in spare time. And then eventually applied for FCA authorization, which, as you all know, it's no easy thing to do. That's for sure. There's a lot of paperwork and a lot of things that need to be true for it to be accepted. And by the time I'd put in the application, it was 8 weeks before they accepted me, which I think to this day is probably still one of the quickest turnaround times on an FCA authorization. Yeah. So that was another sort of feather in my cap. I was like, right, it must be all right if they've said, I've got all the good things in place, and yeah, took out a loan and just got going. Really, the first 3 to 6 months were really hard. It's a lonely old thing trying to set up a business by yourself, and working from a conservatory that was felt like 40 degrees in the summer and minus 10 in the winter. So I cut a lonely picture, but just hard work, determination, making sure I was doing the right things, trusting the process, which is super important. I think a lot of people can get distracted by money, but I was so intent on bringing the right type of businesses in. And at the start, my core focus was just technology companies. I just wanted to make sure that everything tech sat with me, and I could really utilize that in the future purposes of what we're looking to do. And yeah, as time went on, and I had some referrals from existing clients and stuff, we got to a stage where I could bring in people. My first employee was my sister, actually, so that was
Very cool.
quite a nice thing to do. I'm still super grateful for her helping me out in the early stages, and yeah, we just slowly grown from there. Always made sure we had money in the bank. Always made sure we had money to pay someone for at least 12 months before we brought them on. It's just that sort of thing, right processes and growing slowly.
I absolutely love that. I think that is a really cool, proper entrepreneurial story. And congrats on the 8-week turnaround for the FCA. That's mad.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I remember being sat at my desk at this company that I was obviously quite senior in,
Mm.
and the email popped up in front of me, and I was like, "Holy, what am I going to do?" I am not ready for this whatsoever. I mean, I think when you jump into something like that, you immediately just go to the "I'm not ready. I haven't prepared
Yeah.
anything." You panic. But it was just it was the kickstart I needed. It was like, right, you got to go and do this now. This isn't just a business on a bit of paper. This is something you need to go and deliver on.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a good feeling and a scary one at the same time.
I think if we just take it back a bit to something you said that really sort of hit with me would be the fact that you were having to do so much admin.
Mm,
Now that was always a bane of my life. In a company I worked for, there was a book we had which we'd had 500 accounts under it, and the
right.
admin on it was just all day, every day, and it took away from my ability to go after what I really want to do, and that's new business, and I think that issue is common with a lot of young people within the insurance industry, definitely people I know. They're just
Yeah.
constant admin and frustration when all you want to do is innovate and get on and get new business and build new products. And you're being frustrated by this just old clunky machine that takes forever to do anything. And it really sort of saps your motivation. Do you think Insuratech is going to provide careers for those really entrepreneurial, just want to get on and they just want to innovate and create new business?
I think it has to. I don't think I think if you look at blockchain, for example, right, which we know about, the idea of blockchain is the whole disintermediation piece. So you assume that it's just point A to point B now, and that's it. So where does a role for a broker play in that? Effectively what you could build as an insurer is a system that just goes from the insurer to the client with no need for any advisory impact of what brokers should be doing at this moment in time. And that was always one of the things. I met with a guy from Allianz, actually, a blockchain expo, and I introduced myself as Steve from, we were actually called European Technology Risk. Since then we've been rebranded, but at the time I remember talking to him and just being, I asked a question, quite a flippant one, how do you think blockchain is going to impact the insurance industry? And he said, "Oh, you're a broker, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, there won't be any more of you." And I was like, Jesus Christ!
Cheers, mate.
Like, nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
So that's always stuck with me. I obviously at the time I thought he was a bit of an a-hole, but after that I was like, well, I need to get building this tech that I've had in the back of my mind. And
Mm.
looking at I've always had this ethos, and I'll continue to have it, that if someone's good at something, that's all they should be doing. You
Mm.
shouldn't be bogging them down with tasks that they're not being paid for. If you've got a sales guy who's superb, like who's really at the top of his game, his conversion rate is phenomenal, he's getting in front of the right companies. Why is he doing 5 hours of admin a day after these
100%.
sales? I think that we've already shown a massive productivity increase in our execs from dropping in this technology, and we haven't even added all the features yet. I mean, our execs right now with this tech are about 60% more productive. We've got a guy in here, the old school way of calling him would be servicing, but he's our customer success manager, and he's looking at this bit of tech like it's about to put him out of a job. So we've got these things that are like are really beneficial, and most brokers would probably claim this as well. But the biggest overhead is your salaries. So
Mm.
if you've got a guy that's being super powered by this tech, it means that instead of having 3 execs, you've got one who's really on his game, has got all the data in front of him in order to get these insurance policies out and tie them up at the end as well. Why wouldn't you take it? The investment in technology is such a simple thing. I just think that, and I'm going to go back to the to the shift in the industry that we're seeing anyway, with more entrepreneurial coming in and probably the more experienced and aging going out. You look at that and you just think that people are going to wake up, they're going to see that tech is the right thing for the industry. And
Mhm.
as we've touched on, it's super ripe for innovation. So yeah, I'm with you.
I think we were, or definitely when I was at a couple of big brokers, what they were trying to do was trying to force roles together. So, the broker and the account exec, even to down to some sort of technician kind of roles were being forced into this one person's job. And all it meant was the person that is, like you say, particularly good at sales, good at broking, good at being out there, relationship driven, they were just being forced into these sort of, square peg, round hole kind of situations. And it just, I personally don't see how you're going to keep a younger generation coming into the business, happy and excited and ready to innovate, because there are some people that aren't good at sales, and they're really, they're tech focused, they're number focused. So do that role.
Mm.
Don't try and force. I think a lot of industries probably have this issue as well, to be honest. Don't try and force people into a role that they're just never going to be interested in doing, really.
Yeah, and I think that you've probably seen it just as much as I. But you're sat in a room with a load of other sales guys, and the constant frustration is admin, right? I mean, it's just all the sales exec will whinge about. Yeah, they might get the odd hit here and there from a no or something along those lines, but like, I've been in the office until 10, 11 at night tying up admin so that I could just come in and do sales the next day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a healthy way of working for anyone. And you know, like I said, I think we've got it super right, and our staff absolutely love the tech. It's they've all come from other industry roles as well, so we've got real validation on what we're doing. So it's super exciting from a number of levels.
Amazing. So we talked a bit about, how Insuratech is going to change the industry and where we hope it to go. But what kind of roles are going to be available for people, in 5, 10 years time within the Insuratech world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, we've put a lot of thought into our recruitment process and what that's going to look like over the next 3 or 5 years. And the first thing that we've really tried to do, which I think will become more prominent, is we've just tried to create a culture business, a completely different type of culture that's current in the insurance industry. We are dressed down, we are flexible working. We'll work from home if you need to. As I said, we've already got the tech. We've got an eco scheme that promotes sustainability. There's just a load of things that we're doing that I suppose we're more akin to what you would consider a technology company being than a broker. So I honestly think that the insurance industry is going to go that way. We've already seen Lloyd's reduce their dress code to some extent. I think ties were banned.
That was a big fuss was kicked off when that happened.
Wasn't it ever? And it's just so irrelevant. I mean, I think what really turned my mind towards dress down was probably about 8 years ago now. And I went out, I landed this really good opportunity, and it was a company that was paying 50, 60 grand a year for their insurance, had 180 employees, were based in Manchester. And, I got home after landing the lead, and I said to my wife, right, I got to get a new suit. I got to make sure I really dress up, and the stereotypical insurance broker type thing. I need to be super smart, clean the car, did all this stuff. Anyway, I turned up to their office. I went up to the fourth floor. I met the guy who opened the door to me, and I was like, "Hey, it's really nice to meet you." And he goes, "Hi, I'm Paul," and it was the guy I was supposed to be meeting. And this guy was in, I was in super dry flip flops and a pair of board shorts, and I looked like a tosser. I mean, it was one of those where you're like, "Why on?" I've gone through all that effort to see this tech company, and they're looking at me like I'm there to audit them. And it was at that point where I thought, we should be dressing for the businesses that we're seeing. I think that the age-old stereotype of insurance brokers is that they're there to find problems in your business. They're there to be scary, and really, we just want to talk business to business. We just want to find out about the amazing things that they're doing, just making sure that we can help them on their journey rather than get in the way. And that whole dress down culture, it was the first. It wasn't the time. I never had one. I just made sure that people could turn up and be comfy in what they're wearing. But so I've gone off on tangent slightly. But going back to what you mentioned about the roles. I think that we're going to find a lot more data engineers in insurance. Data is just everywhere. We obviously use it in absolutely everything that we do, and we model how our business grows around it as well. Our entire rollout strategy is based on the density of startups in certain areas of the UK. We've done a lot of work around that. a lot of our sales execs will be recruited in those areas as well. So we're so aware of how data is going to look. We find that I think that underwriting is probably going to be more of a cross class of an insurance underwriter and a data manager or a data aggregator or analysis. So I think that tech is certainly going to change that. One of the roles that we're really keen to bring in, certainly before we bring in another round of funding, is a head of people, because I think that if you need to carry a certain culture forward, you'll just end up falling into the same old trap most insurance brokers do, unless you bring in someone to really hold you accountable to that culture. And I think that's not a lot of insurance companies have those right now.
That is a super interesting point. We actually had a C-suite level recruitment company come on and talk to us about, that kind of world, especially within banking and fintech. And she said that is the number one role that they are currently recruiting for within that fintech world.
Yeah,
At that C-suite level, because they see so much value in it.
it really is valuable. And I think you could, there's so many things ahead of people can do, from training to HR to compliance. But the most important for me is just making sure culture's right. That in certain insurance companies and certain insurance brokers, there's this culture, this really laddie culture that tends to follow them around. And I think it's predominantly driven by salespeople that have then turned into CEOs, and they've sort of carried that sort of bravado of having to have a laugh and do certain things. But it really needs to be stamped out, because we're finding that most people in the insurance industry are blokes. The majority tend to be white, and they tend to be fairly well educated, particularly at top tier levels. And for me, our strategy about recruitment is bringing young, hungry. We've got an apprenticeship plan currently in the works. I mean, we want to bring people into the industry rather than trying to recruit from what's there already. I think that we certainly find, particularly at top tier exec levels, that these execs have been around the market. They've probably had a few jobs. They're bit of a journeyman, and they tend to try and sell their book of business to the next person that wants to have them. And by the time they come and work for a company like ours, they're already broken. They're already stuck in this model that they perceive to be the right way of selling insurance. But for us, we're attacking it from a completely different angle. And I think that's going to help us recruit a lot more people from outside the industry as well, which is super, super important for the industry to carry on.
100% agree with that. Now, we usually talk about sort of personality traits that you would think would help you in this industry and this growing Insuratech world. But I guess as we've talked, there's going to be room for people that are data minded, people that are sales minded, techie. Could you elaborate a little bit more about the types of people that you think the industry is going to have going forward?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because and it's not really something I put too much thought into, because we've got quite a clear plan of who we want to bring in. And I think that for us, I think culturally and morally, I think they need to be great people. So our first interview process, we don't even talk about insurance. We just tend to talk about them and what they've been up to and what they enjoy, and what sort of things they like to do, what people they admire, all questions that get them talking about themselves. Because at that point, we'll know a few things. We'll know if they can hold a conversation. We'll know if they're intelligent, and we'll know if they're going to be a good culture fit for us. But I think that because of how I'm hoping the industry will play out, I'm hoping that a lot more pressure is going to be put on companies to offer training and growing people that they bring in. I think that personality traits probably isn't going to be so much of a conversation point moving forward. I think that it helps in sales roles, no doubt, to be confident, and to believe in what they're doing, and every sentence, it has some weight to it. And I certainly think for sales, I think that you can't teach a technical person to sell, but you can teach a salesperson to be technical. That's just my opinion. But that's how I've found it typically. So we certainly, for sales roles, we just look for confident people that we believe are good at talking to people. They don't have to have any insurance knowledge at all, because that bit we can cover off. I think that particularly in insurance, and other trades as well, I think there are so many different roles. And if we consider the roles that that are going to be relevant, I suppose, moving forward. There's certain character traits that head of people need to have. I think they need to be compassionate, understanding. They need to be able to build rapport, and all the good things that someone approachable should have. I've mentioned sales. You then look at technical. I mean, they need to have fantastic technical knowledge and be intelligent and probably well educated to some extent. And I think that there's underwriters, for example, they just need to know the ins and outs of policy wordings, right, and how to apply that to businesses. So many different roles and traits that attribute those. But I think that I think the one trait that I'd love to see moving forward is just someone with a bit of passion about insurance. And I'm still waiting to see it. I don't, in the 14 years of being in insurance, I must have recruited probably in my time about 150 people. And I've never had someone come into an interview and be like, I cannot wait to work in insurance. This is what I've been dreaming. This is my dream job. It's just one of those, it's just never going to happen. But I think that, with the right program and education, I think that we might be able to get to that stage soon.
I have to say, I think people like yourself that are creating these, challenger brokers, and we had this conversation. I love the fact that you said you don't want to force people into doing things that they're just not good at, because it was a waste of time and a waste of energy. If you ran a business like that, I think you would genuinely get people that are actually very excited to come to work and do insurance.
I think so. And on Monday, actually, we moved into this huge new office, which is about 4 or 5 times the size of the one that we were in before. With a view to filling it with really cool people. But there's a bit of a running joke in the office at the minute that I'm just buying loads of crap to make the office look cool. and it's just about providing an environment where people love to come to work. I think that so many people can get bogged down by the role at hand. And I've certainly had roles like this as well, where I've just felt so much pressure from top tier management to perform at a level. But I was in an office where we had wonky chairs and tables that were falling apart. And you sort of think to yourself at this stage, well, if I had a great environment and really amazing people to work with, I can kind of deal with that pressure. It's one of those sort of byproducts of having quite a senior role at a company. But it's so much of work for people should be enjoyment. It just has to be. Nobody should be in a job, and I'll say this to anyone listening as well, nobody should be in a job that you hate, because there's so many good jobs out there that you'll love. Don't put yourself through pressure and lack of sleep and anxiety and depression about work. It's just not worth it. Find yourself something that you really enjoy. It's just such a key thing of what we're trying to build, just making people enjoy working in insurance.
I couldn't agree more. And it's been an absolute pleasure hearing about your career and what you're doing at Fueled. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on and have a chat.
No, man, I really appreciate it. And, as I said, I think prior to jumping on this call, I'll talk till the cows come home about business and insurance in general. So, I've loved it.
And where can people find you and your company and what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, obviously. So if anyone, I pretty much accept every connection request I can nowadays. But otherwise, we're at fueledgroup.com. We've got a really cool, I think it's a really cool website, but I built it, so I'm going to say that. But yeah, I mean, you can check all about us there. We've got some amazing news being announced recently, and in future, and there's a few positions open as well. So if anyone's looking for a job in the Malvern, Gloucester, Worcester-ish area, then give us a shout. We'll have a chat.
Amazing. Thank you again, Stephen.
No worries, man. Thank you.